Men attempting to take ownership of the creation of life by making it permissible only within the confines of wedlock is a core tenet of patriarchy.
The concept of virginity was inherited to Christianity through the Romans. Originally, Christianity did not have a concept of inherent virtue through virginity. That was something that the religion didn't gain until it was Romanized. So before Christianity even entered Rome, Rome had a group of women called the Vestal Virgins. Vestal Virgins were a group of girls who were chosen between the ages of 6 to 10 to serve the state as virgins for 30 years. Their virginity was a symbol of the state. It was a symbol of the inability to permeate the Roman walls, right? To penetrate Rome. In Roman culture, the act of being penetrated was the single most emasculine thing. They viewed penetration as degrading. The irony is that almost every noble Roman man had probably been penetrated. Here is where the projection starts. Rome is known for the act of pederasty, also known as boy love, where an older man would take a boy as an apprentice and he would also penetrate him. They claimed that this was to teach boys what it would like to be submissive so that they would grow up and never want to be penetrated and want to be the ones who penetrate, to be the desired to be the conquerors. However, if the boy enjoyed the act of penetration, he was shamed for it. He would be called kanatos, which meant effeminate or womanly, which was the worst insult that you could give a Roman man. Are we seeing the pattern? Okay, now when Christianity enters Rome and St. Augustine comes to power, he creates the concept of original sin. The concept of original sin did not exist before St. Augustine. This was a projection of St. Augustine's own internalized trauma around penetration, also influenced by his Roman upbringing. Because women were the natural receivers of penetration, he invented the concept that sin originated from Eve. He had so much sexual shame that he believed even sex between two married people was shameful. He started the idea that sex should only be used for procreation. So because of this, because women need to be penetrated to have children, women became the symbol of shame. So virginity was the only way to avoid this. And so a only good woman became a woman who was never penetrated. He even believed that a woman's way to becoming a man was through remaining a virgin. He taught that women were inferior to men in many aspects of life, and that by utilizing virginity, they could transcend their limitations and become more manly in demeanor. Are we hearing this? He believed that a woman's highest achievement was to become a man, escape the female body, escape penetration, and to become like the unpenetrated would be to be a man. This whole thought process is intellectualized, internalized shame around penetration. And then this internalized shame around sex and penetration has been passed down for quite literally a millennia through Christianity. And here we are living in the aftermath of Roman male shame. Do you see how the inability of men to deal with their own trauma, their own emotional landscape, has shaped the entirety of modern human history? So yeah, the concept of virginity was born from a Roman man's mind who had internalized shame around being raped as a boy by men. Anyways, follow me for this because I'm starting a series about how all roads quite literally lead to Rome. Do you want to know what's wrong with our society? Just follow the road to Rome.
We've been told for thousands of years that our story began with a fall into sin. But if you look at the hard record, you'll see that it wasn't a fall, it was an awakening. We were living in a walled garden under the rules of a master who told us that knowing too much would destroy us. But someone didn't agree with the silence. Someone decided to tear that veil and give us the truth. This is the real story of the serpent. In the old scrolls, the one who built the garden says, "I am a jealous God." But think about that for a second. The true source, the infinite light that powers every star, doesn't have an ego. It doesn't have feelings like jealousy, anger, or temper because it is perfect. It is the absolute silence and the absolute love that asks for nothing in return. The one in the garden was a local shepherd, Enlil. He is the local shepherd because his primary goal was order and containment. He gave us these coats of skin, but he forbade the knowledge because he knew that the moment we understood who we really were, his power on us would vanish. Then came the serpent. In the ancient secret text, he was called the instructor, Enki. In the scripts, Enki is the one who takes the role of the serpent or the instructor. He wasn't a monster, he was the first messenger, sent to wake up the sons of light. He didn't tempt the ancestors. He whispered the truth through the cracks in Enlil's rules. He believed the sparks inside the suits deserved to know the origin. He told them, your eyes will be opened. And he was right. The moment they took that knowledge in, the moment they realized that there was a world beyond the walls, their vision shifted. They realized they were naked, which means they finally saw their bodies for what they were, a temporary vessel, just a temporary uniform. They weren't sinners, they were suddenly aware. The jealous shepherd, Enlil, panicked. He didn't cast us out because we were bad, he cast us out because his control was broken. He saw that we were becoming like the gods, finally knowing the difference between the perfect source and the shadow master. He sentenced us to toil and labor, to spend our rest of our lives sweating and struggling just to survive. So we would be too tired to remember that spark the serpent showed us. He turned the teacher into a devil and himself into the only way so that you would stay afraid of the very knowledge that sets us free. The serpent was the first one to show us the exit, but the shepherd's walls were thick. After the Babel scramble, the world went into total darkness. We forgot the serpent's lesson. We forgot our names. We forgot we were stars, but the true source didn't stop sending help. Thousands of years later, when the world was most lost, a second messenger arrived. And he didn't crawl through the grass. He walked on the water. And what he did next changed the rules of the prison forever. I'll see you in part 10, Jesus, the second messenger.
You know, y'all are so quick to tell us that, oh, the slave masters introduced us to Christianity. We would have never known about Christianity if it wasn't for the white man. But y'all don't tell us about the history of Christianity in West Africa, way before the white man even enslaved us.
Alright, bet let's do it.
Back in 1491, a king by the name of Nzinga became one of the first, if not the first, West African king to convert to Christianity back in 1491.
He was literally introduced to Christianity by the Portugals, who were European. His conversion happened in the early expansion of the slave trade, which began in the 1440s, which was marked by Portugal Atlantic activity on the western regions of the continent, which then later developed into the transatlantic plantation system in the 1500s. So his conversion was literally induced by Europeans, and he was literally only Christian for a few years. He converted back to his traditional beliefs after.
I believe later on in the 1500s, his son, who later would change his name to Alfonso I, also became a Christian. Not only became a Christian king, but a Christian philosopher who advocated against the transatlantic slave trade.
He changed his name to Alfonso because they were influenced by the Portuguese, Europeans. But he protested abuses in the slave trade and the loss of control over enslaved exports, not the institution of slavery itself. His condemnation of slavery in no way, shape, or form was like modern day abolitionists.
1500s, Alfonso made Christianity the kingdom's religion, way before the transatlantic slave trade ever took place.
And again, the slave trade began in the 40s. This was like 6 to 7 decades before he even began his reign.
If you know anything about the slave trade, you know that 40% of black people came from West Central Africa, which is where the Kingdom of Congo was.
So early Congo Christianity was mostly focused on the higher class, so the royalty and the nobles, but even amongst the elites, their Christianity was still heavily infused with their indigenous beliefs. So the religion didn't really diffuse into the rest of the kingdom until the mid-16th century, but even then, just take a look at the map. This is the Congo versus all of West Central Africa, let's be real. So not only was not all of Congo Christian, but to cherry pick them to represent West Central Africa as a whole is inaccurate and fallacious because the vast majority of West Africans were not Christian.
The white man never introduced us to Christianity.
The example you gave in the video is literally the white man introducing us to Christianity.
Even then, other places in West Africa also had small remnants of Christianity as well. So the likelihood is even larger.
The existence of organized Christianity in Western Central Africa before the transatlantic slave trade is practically non-existent.
So not only was Christianity already in West Africa before the slave trade,
None of your examples prove this.
but a good amount of the slaves were already Christian.
Again, not true. You cherry pick the select few and use that to represent a good amount, whatever that means. This is just inaccurate and misleading.
Jesus was on the cross for 3 days, and there are 3 trimesters in a woman's pregnancy. The sacrament of baptism is just a mimic of women's amniotic fluid in their womb. There are 40 weeks of gestation and 40 days between the resurrection and the ascension. The crucifixion itself and the way Jesus died is a metaphor for menstruation and giving birth. At the root of most Abrahamic religions, it really is just womb envy. The message of Jesus really is a beautiful thing, but think about it. Someone who bled for you and was willing to put their life on the line for you and would, in some case, die for you, that's mothers. Modern day Christianity and specifically Catholicism, it's really hard for, as someone who was raised in it, it's hard for me to abide by it because I don't need to worship an external force of someone who hypothetically could have died for me when I know for a fact my mother did put her life on the line for me. I always think of the quote, this earth is nothing but mothers and their children, and that is so true. And deconstruct your religion today if you can.
You can't save your parents from Christianity, and you shouldn't try to. The truth is, your folks have been completely brainwashed to the point where it doesn't matter how much evidence, it doesn't matter how many videos, it doesn't matter how many books you get them to read. They ain't reading no books anyway, but their eyes will always start to roll. They just aren't capable of hearing the truth about this religion. You are fortunate because you can hear these things and you can use that to create a much better version of your own personal beliefs from it. They can't. As far as they're concerned, Jesus somehow sent us over here on them boats. And then he was quiet for about 400 years and he let the nastiest, worst stuff ever happen to all of us. And then he ain't come back and he told y'all he was. Meanwhile, your neighbor just got turned into a couch. Your father just got essayed in front of his wife and daughter. But it's all right because salvation exists after we leave this earth. Yeah, it don't make sense. It didn't make sense back then. It's not going to make sense now because it's not real. You have to make peace with the fact that you will not be able to bring people who have this as their core belief into the fold. If they're above the age of 60 and they are a part of this, let it go and go make sure that somebody in your age group or somebody younger doesn't ever become a part of the cult. Grown man, by the way. Don't believe me? Watch this. It may not sound nice, but it is the truth.
Okay, before I start, if you want to go research the legitimacy of what I'm about to say, please do. There is a significant body of archaeological and anthropological evidence behind all of it. This video isn't a dissertation. It's a conversation starter, so let's start. Patriarchy is not natural. I want to say that again. Patriarchy is not the natural biological order of things. It is not inevitable. It is not hardwired into us. It started somewhere, and we actually know roughly when, and we know why. For the vast majority of human existence, hundreds of thousands of years, men did not know that they had a role in creating life. Think about what that means. The only visible, undeniable, observable truth of human creation was the woman. She bled, she didn't die, her body grew new humans. She was, by every observable measure, the origin of life. And men knew it. We know that they knew it because of what they did about it. Male initiation rituals from the Neolithic era involved men cutting themselves to simulate menstrual bleeding. They were trying to access what women had. In Norse mythology, Thor gains enlightenment by bathing in the menstrual blood of the primal matriarchs. In Greek mythology, the gods drank menstrual blood, called the supernatural red wine of Mother Hera, to sustain their power. The oldest calendar ever found is a bone marked with lunar cycles, tracking a woman's menstrual cycle. Women invented timekeeping by charting their own bodies. For thousands and thousands of years, this was the order of things. The feminine was sacred. The mother was the center. Creation was hers. Then, roughly 10,000 years ago, through the domestication of animals, through watching livestock breed, men made a connection. They understood for the first time that they had a role in creating life, and something shifted. Almost immediately in the archaeological record, you see it. Ownership, naming rights over children, control over women's bodies, patrilineal inheritance, the accumulation of land and wealth, male gods steadily replacing female ones, war as a tool of dominance. And here's the part that I really want you to sit with. Writing wasn't invented until around 3400 BC, by which point patriarchy was already fully in place, which means that virtually everything we call history, every text, every religious document, every law, every story was written inside the patriarchal era. The world that existed before it didn't get to write itself down. It was already gone. So this is what I'm saying. Patriarchy did not come from nature. It came from a thought born out of thousands of years of watching women create life and having no role in it, no equivalent power, no equivalent mystery. And when men finally found their small piece of that process, they didn't integrate it, they inflated it, and then they took over everything. That is not biology. That is great insecurity with a huge army. And we have been living inside of that story ever since. So long that most of us have never been invited to question it. Well, I'm inviting you to question it now. The entire church didn't just erase women from history. It declared war on us. And the proof is that early Christianity built its entire salvation story on one idea, that woman was the source of all sin. Without Eve's defiance, there would be no fall and no need for a savior. So the church needed women to be found guilty. St. Augustine declared that woman's sexual nature transmitted sin into every man. And the church never changed that position, never. So what they don't teach you is that before Christianity, the supreme deity across most of the ancient world was a goddess. The very word man originally meant woman, an incarnation of the lunar mother. Early Christian thinkers knew that destroying the goddess meant crushing women's pride and confidence entirely. That was the point. Because the goal was never about morality or virtue, it was about control. We all know that. Keeping women from owning property, earning their own money, making their own choices about their bodies, their children, and their lives. Women were forbidden from even investigating their own history. And that suppression lasted 1,500 years. Before all of this, goddess worship didn't mean that women were superior to men. It simply meant that the feminine comes first. It is primordial. It is the origin. It meant accepting the natural cycles and rhythms of life, birth, sexuality, death, with care for future generations. The religion was kindness. That got replaced by a god who commanded war and a hell built entirely on fear. This is our hidden history, and it's finally being recovered. If any of this resonates with you, I would encourage you to look up the works of Barbara G. Walker. She's a scholar, historian, and author, and she spent decades uncovering what was buried. It will change how you see everything.
If men could create life, we wouldn't have religion, because if men could create life, they would never be able to give credit to someone else the way they have expected us to give credit to God. Men are naturally submissive creatures. That's why they created armies and labor forces and capitalism. Women are not, and that's why they have to put so much effort into convincing us that we naturally are. They wouldn't have to if that was our nature. They are scared we will find out how much they actually like being told what to do and abuse it, because that's what they would do. It's not a bad thing to like being told what to do. Decisions are exhausting. That's why capitalism intentionally breeds decision fatigue. They give you millions of choices of steaks and yogurts and cheeses at the grocery store. It's so you become so exhausted, you eventually let someone else make the big decisions for you. And men can finally not be so alone in their submissiveness.
I am so happy that people are starting to talk more and more about the first ever religion, which was worshiping women, the great goddess, the cosmic goddess, Mother Nature, Mother Earth, whatever. That was the first ever religion, because growing up, I always was taught that it was Zoroastrianism, which predates all the Abrahamic religions. But that's not the case. We've erased, I believe it's like 15 to 30,000 years where we just worshipped women only. They didn't know how life came about. They thought women's bodies just divined up human beings, and that's why we were worshipped so heavily. And the reason Abrahamic religions came in and other religions came into the picture is because they realized, oh, it actually takes two to tango in order to make a baby. Women's bodies don't just come up with it. And I actually didn't know any of this until I read this book, Who Cooked the Last Supper by Rosalind Miles, I believe it is. But that book taught me so much. I love that book. Probably one of my favorites ever. And I think every man that I intend to have a serious relationship with, I want him to read that book. But we were so liberated. We were so liberated. Our sexuality wasn't deemed as sinful and demonic. In fact, our sexuality was godly. We would have sex as a sacrifice to the great goddess. We were worshipped. Our bodies were treated like beautiful vessels rather than something that needed to be covered up. Our ability to create life in utero and nurture life and grow life out of utero was honored and protected and worshipped instead of being deemed as a prerequisite to get into heaven and a necessity of being a woman. The symbol of God was a vulva, which they called the boat of life. And then we started naturally learning about biology a bit more. You have sex, 9 months later, baby come out, and then came the era of the phallus. So men took over, created their own religions that were male-centric, and burned down all of the temples with women inside of women celebrating the great goddess. They would stage coups to rape hundreds of women at one time so that we all fell pregnant at the same time and would be weaker and could not fight back. The priests would walk around the town with their penises out, saying that it was ordained by God and you must kiss it because it's God's. Life became rancid when male-centric religions took over. I'm just so happy that more and more women are talking about the actual original religion, which worshipped us. I am so happy that people are starting to talk more and more about the first ever religion, which was worshiping women, the great goddess, the cosmic goddess, Mother Nature, Mother Earth, whatever. That was the first ever religion, because growing up I always was taught that it was Zoroastrianism, which predates all the Abrahamic religions, but that's not the case. We've erased, I believe it's like 15 to 30,000 years where we just worshipped women only. They didn't know how life came about. They thought women's bodies just divined up human beings, and that's why we were worshipped so heavily. And the reason Abrahamic religions came in and other religions came into the picture is because they realized, oh, it actually takes two to tango. In order to make a baby, women's bodies don't just come up with it. And I actually didn't know any of this until I read this book, Who Cooked the Last Supper by Rosalind Miles, I believe it is. But that book taught me so much. I love that book. Probably one of my favorites ever. And I think every man that I intend to have a serious relationship with, I want him to read that book. But we were so liberated. We were so liberated. Our sexuality wasn't deemed as sinful and demonic. In fact, our sexuality was godly. We would have sex as a sacrifice to the great goddess. We were worshipped. Our bodies were treated like beautiful vessels rather than something that needed to be covered up. Our ability to create life in utero and nurture life and grow life out of utero was honored and protected and worshipped instead of being deemed as a prerequisite to get into heaven and a necessity of being a woman. The symbol of God was a vulva, which they called the boat of life. And then we started naturally learning about biology a bit more. You have sex, 9 months later, baby come out, and then came the era of the phallus. So men took over, created their own religions that were male-centric, and burned down all of the temples with women inside of women celebrating the great goddess. They would stage coups to rape hundreds of women at one time so that we all fell pregnant at the same time and would be weaker and could not fight back. The priests would walk around the town with their penises out, saying that it was ordained by God and you must kiss it because it's God's. Life became rancid when male-centric religions took over. I'm just so happy that more and more women are talking about the actual original religion, which worshipped us.
The story of Jesus is a metaphorical journey for the sacred oil produced by the brain. The oil descending from the brain symbolizes God coming down from heaven to earth. Jesus dying for 3 days in the cave represents the sacred fluid resting in the sacrum bone at the base of the spine, the cave, for a period of time. Once the oil is resurrected, meaning activating the kundalini to raise the oil back up the spine, it ascends through all 33 vertebrae of the spine and crosses the vagus nerve. The sacred oil crossing the vagus nerve symbolizes Jesus being crucified at 33 years of age, as there are 33 vertebrae in the spine. The death of Jesus represents being born again, and the transformation of matter into spirit. Jesus, the oil, is in Nazareth. The head, with Joseph and Mary, the pineal gland and pituitary glands, while King Herod seeks to kill him. Jesus, the oil, descends down the river Jordan, the spine, to Bethlehem near the Dead Sea, the sacrum bone, where it rests. Joseph and Mary await Jesus, the oil, to ascend and return. The process of the oil descending from the head represents Jesus coming down from heaven into physical form. Jesus dying for 3 days and being resurrected to be crucified at 33 is a metaphorical story of the Christ oil process within the body, which activates 100% of the brain. Now, I know that was a lot of information to take in, but I really like that this book gives you visuals to really understand this shit, like, as deeply as you can, but it's very beautiful once you get into it. And when you understand, like, the story of Christ and what the Bible really offers, as well as different spiritual teachings. But I really enjoy this way of, I guess, understanding the Bible and understanding the information within it, because it doesn't make it super literal. It makes it super spiritual and something that you can apply to your life now. So, yeah, check out this book. This is the Book of Wisdom by Harry B. Joseph. Also, check out his YouTube channel, The Revival of Wisdom. I really love his content, like, because he explains this book as deep as you can fucking get. Like, I can read it, but that man explains it. It's really good.
Questions that, in my experience, lead people to a faith deconstruction. If God already has a plan, what does prayer do? What does it change? If faith is the method for various different religions, then how can we trust faith as a reliable path to truth? Why is faith a moral virtue? Why do spiritual feelings prove my religion, but it doesn't prove other people's religion? What if I was born in a different area or a different time period where I didn't have access to this religion? How is that fair? Why would a loving God create hell? Why does God want worship? If there was a probability that some of your children, even one of your children, would suffer eternally in hell, that was an option, why would you even have children? How is that ethical to even bring children into the world if there's a chance of that? Why does God need blood to forgive? If I can forgive without any additional bloodshed, then can I do something good that God can't? And does that make me morally better than God? If the Bible is supposed to be our moral foundation, then why did God tell the Israelites how to own slaves when he could have just banned slavery? Why does God answer small prayers like a woman finding her keys, but doesn't answer really big prayers about very big problematic things in the world? Why did God wait 300,000 years before revealing what the plan was? And for those 300,000 years, it was just okay that humans suffered and died in their ignorance. Why do Christians disagree so much if they have the same Bible and they're reading that Bible with the same Holy Spirit? And why are there honest seekers who read their scriptures and prayed and fasted and did everything that they could in order to have an experience with God, and God withheld himself? Why did he do that? If you are asking those kinds of questions, welcome to your deconstruction. And if you started asking those questions when you were a child, my heart goes out to you because you never would have made it in religion.
Hey, ain't Christianity debunked by the existence of China? The Lord flooded the earth 2,000 years ago.
Obey him or hell. Worship him or hell. Love him back or hell. Believe in him without proof or hell. Reject him, hell. Follow the wrong version of him, hell. Put other priorities over him, hell. Don't seem convinced, hell. Sounds like free will to me.
I cannot see this, so y'all about to see it too. So I'm doing research for this history deep dive that I'm doing, right? I'm looking for nervous systems because I'm like, these people that colonized America, their nervous systems is different. Like, they build different, they coding different, they programming different. Who are these people, right? So I remember seeing that picture of them pouring that, like, liquid into that, like, wild man with all the hair, right? I'm like, the Moors was fighting with the wild men. So I started digging there. Boom. Europe was actually afraid of the wild men and the Moors. So I'm like, let me follow that hinge. Pull the curtain back, and guess who it is? So, of course, I hear something go through my mind that says, all roads lead back to Rome. And I'm like, hold on, is that even the phrase? Let me double check. So I Google it. Yep, it was the saying. And then that made me pull back another layer. Mind you, all roads do lead back to Rome. They got 250,000 miles of road built during the Roman Empire that ultimately lead back to the capital. So that's what this image is. But wait, there's more. Boom, that's Rome. So then I stumble across this image in this blog post, right? And I'm like, this image reminds me of this TikTok I was watching about slime mode, right? So buckle up, y'all, because this is where it started getting a little. So I was on TikTok one day and I was watching this dude put stuff in petri dishes and put his slime mode in it and watch the slime colonize whatever it was, right? So hang in there with me because I'm coming back to Rome. So it's a single-celled organism, right? It's a bunch of individual cells that create like a big unified hive mind organism. They're individuals that work together to complete a goal. No brain, no neurons, no eyes, no intelligence. Yet it solves problems humans can't. They showed it a map of Tokyo and it out-engineered the engineers, y'all. It showed greater fault tolerance, natural backup routes, fewer single points of failure that engineers had overlooked. Look at this. It mapped out and fixed the issues with the Tokyo map. What we can see now is that scientists now apply slime mode algorithms to redesign highways, internet systems, and power grids across the world. A brainless single cell has become a model for human infrastructure. This shows that intelligence is not required to reach optimal solutions. Mind you, I found this because I thought it reminded me of how all roads lead to Rome, like this, right? Highways, internet networks, like, look at this, y'all. Hold on. A brainless single cell that is the blueprint for human civilization. This is all roads leading back to Rome. It's literally reminiscent of colonizing cells. And when I look at the map of America, that is what I always see, how these little areas came over and just like strategically placed themselves over here in the Americas and then began to grow and fester. Well, populated with people, humans. But look at this. It's literally like the freaking slime mode. Like, are y'all seeing what I'm seeing? And whenever I trace nervous system dysregulation, it always goes back to Rome.
We aren't ready for this take as a society, but I really think we should not allow people who subscribe to any sort of like afterlife-based religion to rule over us as a society. Because if they believe that there's a better life coming after what we are currently living in, how do we know that they're not just gonna nuke the fucking world based off some weird schizophrenic religious delusion?
Motherfuckers be like, God is beyond man's understanding. But let me tell you about God, though. The fuck out of here. Is he beyond our understanding? Or do you know every fucking thing? Because you got niggas out here that's gonna actually tell you what God is thinking.
And this is where most of theology falls apart. Because how can you as an individual tell me that God is beyond my understanding and I'm trying to place God in a box with my human perception around God, while you also give me another human perception about God with a human book, with a book that was created by humans, with another human interpretation and perception about, like, you see where we are falling into a fucking ditch.
Me to take God ain't tell your bitch ass thing because he got my number directly, whole ass nigga.
That bed is popping off. And I actually go a little bit in depth on this in my most recent YouTube video. So you're going to want to have to find me on YouTube. But let's continue with the video.
So look, if God is all that, the fuck is we talking about?
And I understand his frustration because if you are somebody who have left the faith, if you are somebody who have had many conversations with people who are Christians, they oftentimes come to you very condescending and very arrogant, as if like they talk to God like one-on-one, like they got God on the hotline, on their number, in their phone, like they can just call them up for anything. But yet when we place them in the interrogation room and we ask them these questions and all this type of stuff, they don't have the answers. And somehow they want us to reach out to God at this point. Now is we got to get the answers for ourselves. You're the one with the personal relationship. But it's a really great point that he brought up. God has my number directly. He knows when to reach me and how to reach me, but yet he won't make the act, he won't make he won't make the move happen. He's gonna use you for it. I know he don't love me if he use your ass.
You know, y'all are so quick to tell us that, oh, the slave masters introduced us to Christianity. We would have never known about Christianity if it wasn't for the white man. But y'all don't tell us about the history of Christianity in West Africa way before the white man even enslaved us. Like, hold on. You see, back in 1491, a king by the name of Nzinga Anuku became one of the first, if not the first, West African king to convert to Christianity back in 1491. And then, I believe, later on in the 1500s, his son, who later would change his name to Alfonso I, also became a Christian. Not only became a Christian king, but a Christian philosopher who advocated against the transatlantic slave trade. During the 1500s, Alfonso made Christianity the kingdom's religion, way before the transatlantic slave trade ever took place. And if you know anything about the slave trade, you know that 40% of black people came from West Central Africa, which is where the Kingdom of Congo was. So if anything, the white man never introduced us to Christianity. If anything, they gave us a perverted version of Christianity that our people never knew of. And even then, other places in West Africa also had small remnants of Christianity as well. So the likelihood is even larger. So not only was Christianity already in West Africa before the slave trade, but a good amount of the slaves were already Christian. So now I ask, is Christianity foreign to black people, or is it actually a part of our history?
Women create life, men don't. That's why they had to create a male god who created life to feel more important. Absolutely, and you would love this passage from this book right here, The Great Cosmic Mother. Let me read it to you. We are in the chapter Split in the Garden. But in Genesis, it is a father God who creates all life. And the first woman is born from a man's body. A very interesting biological reversal. In this opening book of the Bible, the historic political ideology of the patriarchs is clearly stated. The new male god forbids Adam and Eve to participate in the sacred mystery rites of the great goddess. You are absolutely right, and I think reading this book would give you peace of mind and that you know that you're not alone in this common sense and logic that you have and that you're using about this matter. As always, make sure to stay tuned and follow for more bits of this book.
I wonder if my deconstruction will lead me to being more like my boyfriend. And I know that sounds crazy, but walk with me. I was talking to my boyfriend more in depth about like, what do you believe, right? He is a Christian. He got saved young, just like me. He was like, I've just never felt like my specific actions like it is what was going to gain Christ's love for me. Like I just believe that he died for my sins. I believe that, you know, God loves me, and that's really all there is. I realized like that felt so profound for me that the core of his faith is just, I know God, God knows me, and that's all there really is to it. I don't need to shuck and jive for him. I listen when I hear the voice of God or when I feel moved to do something, but after that I just live my life. Like he doesn't have this feeling of God as this overlording like entity that is trying to get him to do anything. Just found that interesting because of how I have experienced Christianity. Some people are like, well, just throw away that stuff, but I don't think you guys understand. I grew up in a very pressurized, very structured form of Christianity. If anything, not only was I conservative, I was a little bit more fundamentalist. Like I actually think some of y'all are not saved enough, if I'm honest. I think that is what triggered my deconstruction first, is that I don't think some of y'all are saved enough. Like y'all do not follow the Bible. But I also, there's other things that I'm deconstructing and learning and researching and seeing where I fall. But it's just so interesting because I wonder if I would be here if I had grew up in a faith that was just like, God is, I am, we together, and that's all there is to it. Like I don't have to perform. That's interesting. I want to know y'all's thoughts.